Welcome everyone to the second session of this fourth day of the Research Data Alliance Global Adoption Week. My name is Timea Bairo. I work with the Digital Repository of Ireland, and together with my colleague Yolanda Meleko from the RDA Secretariat, I will be moderating this second session of the day entitled Disseminate, Link and Find, which is showcasing RDA solutions designed to support researchers and practitioners in this phase of the research data lifecycle. So as I mentioned, this is the second session for the day. We already had one this morning at 7 UTC. Thank you all for joining. Before we get started, we would like to share a few housekeeping points. So please note that we are recording this session, and the recording will be made public after the webinar, and it will be linked from the RDA website from the main Adoption Week page. You are also in listen-only mode by default, so we kindly ask you to use the question box that is in your control panel, GoToWebinar control panel, to ask any questions that you might have after each of the presentations today. Please make sure you also add your name so we can connect the questions to you. Also, as well, in the case that there would be further discussion necessary related to your question. You can also raise your hand, and we will try to unmute you during the Q&A sessions if you wish to speak. So so far as we can see, there are about 42 participants, attendees that have joined, and I think that the number will go up as we go along. But we would like to see just a little bit who's in the audience. So we've prepared a short Slido poll. So please, if you would like to join in, so we can understand who's in the audience, please go to slido.com and enter the code #W339. You will see our first question there. So just to understand which is your primary role. So if you are research support staff, which I see is quite a few of you are project managers, researchers, which is very good, librarians and archivists. This would be useful information for our speakers, just to understand the audience and interests, and maybe focus some of the points that they will be discussing based on the various perspectives of the people that are in the audience. I see we have also quite an interesting number of IT and infrastructure specialists. Most of you are research support staff, as I mentioned. We have some policymakers and funders as well. So thank you all for joining and for answering the poll. This is very useful information. We'll pass on to the second question, just to understand your primary domain of expertise. So if it's social sciences, natural sciences, humanities. I see we have people also from the agricultural sciences. Many are domain agnostic, or there might be multidisciplinary, working in multidisciplinary approaches, engineering and technology, medical and health sciences. So thank you very much. Natural sciences seems to dominate the audience in terms of domain. I'll pass on to the next question. We would be also very interested to learn about the country that you're based in, just to understand. So France, Sweden, the Netherlands, Germany, United States, many, Australia as well, UK, the Netherlands, Japan. I know that it's not a really friendly hour for Japan. Germany, France. So we see a lot of good representation from Europe, as this is a little bit of it's a more friendlier time than our previous session for the European audience. Thank you very much. Thank you for answering that. South Africa, it's very good to know that we also have from other regions attendees. So thank you. I'll leave this open. It is very useful information for us as a takeaway from the webinar. I'll just go back to our agenda slide for the day. Hopefully that will be smooth. That would smoothly go into full screen. So we have quite an interesting lineup for this session as well. So we have representatives from 2 of the RDA groups, the Data Discovery Paradigms Interest Group and the FAIR Data Maturity Model Working Group. And we also have an adoption story to complement the first two presentations. So first on our agenda, as I mentioned, is our representatives from the chairs of the Data Discovery Paradigms Interest Group, Mingfang Wu from the Australian Research Data Commons, and Fotis Psomopoulos from CERTH. I'll kindly ask you to turn on just a little bit your cameras if possible, just so everyone can see you and they can also connect the face to the name and the presentation. I think Mingfang, you would be the one to start, and you'll pass on afterwards to Fotis. The 2 of you are going to talk about 2 of the outputs of the Data Discovery Paradigms Interest Group. So without further ado, I'll pass on the presenter rights to you, Ming, and take it away. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Timia. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, yeah,
brilliant.
Good.
Thank you.
And thank you, and hello, everyone. The Data Discovery Paradigm Interest Group started in late 2016. We had about 4 task forces then during the year 2017 and 2018. I'm going to talk about the supporting output from the relevance ranking task force. Fotis will talking about the supporting output from 2 other task forces shortly. Okay. Okay. So briefly, what is relevance ranking task force about? In last decades or so, we have seen a great number of data repositories appear, and in each repository, the number of data sets has also been increasing, and we will see this trend will continue in coming years. Now, the question is, there are so many data out there, it's challenging for discovering data set. So for each repository, mostly the plug in a data discovery system there, and with this search box for user to find the data. Behind this black search box, there is component there like an index, metadata, match that with query and do the ranking. So the relevance task force is a forum for exchanging experience of deploying and develop those component index, matching, and ranking, because they play important role to determine the discoverability of the data. So from start, if we want to improve data discovery, so we at the beginning we thought this task force we need to do a survey to understand what data search system and ranking model have been deployed by repositories, and also how good are those deployed data discovery system are, because that can serves as a benchmark to be looked back in future to assess how much and in what ways data search has improved. And also we want to use this survey to identify potential collaborative projects. So the supporting output is this survey report. So this survey has 33 questions to achieve the goal as presented in previous slides. These 33 questions cover 6 areas. For example, what is a characteristic of repository? What the ranking configuration, and what is there any evaluation has been done, and what method has been used to boost the searchability, and what kind of future activities they would like this task force to carry on. So we had 98 repositories, representatives from 98 repositories participated in the survey. Most of them are from North America and Europe, and also a few from Asian Pacific, like Australia, Japan, and China. And those repositories cover a spread of domains, but most of them are life science, earth science, and social science. The survey report has a detailed analysis to each question. Here, I just list a few highlights here. So, for what search systems has been deployed, so most of repository use the common search systems, Elasticsearch, Solr, and Lucene. Solr and Elasticsearch also, their search component is built on Lucene library, but they provide more search options like a facet search. So underneath, the ranking model is similar. And this search system within the Lucene, and there are also a number of models to choose from. We asked those repositories which models, the ranking models they have deployed, and half of them don't know. And each of those models have been deployed by a few repositories. And it's worth to point out that those ranking models have been tested rigorously for text retrieval, but not so much for data retrieval. So how to select this model is also for a question. So, and the majority of this participating repository didn't do any evaluation and the performance of the data discovery system. And for those who did, and they did informal, most of them did informal evaluation, for example, send a few query and look at the search results. And 9 of them did a thorough evaluation. They build test collections, but no performance measures being provided in the survey. Although the larger number of them didn't do any evaluation, but half of them feel that their search engine or search system will satisfy most users. So so what takeaway message is, so we found out that so repositories under pressure to put resources to plug in data discovery system and just use a default ranking model, but they desire guidelines for improving relevance ranking, and especially those small repositories having the greatest need. And then secondary, repositories understand that their system need to be evaluated and improved, but often lack resources, for example, time and expertise to carry out that evaluation. So this raise opportunity for people working in the search space to collaborate with, including people from data community, from technology community, and from library information science community to work together to build test collections and to improve the ranking, and also test that with users to improve the data search services. So for details, you can see the follow the link here to see to read the report for detail. Okay, that's all from me. I am now passing on to Fotis.
Yes, Fotis, I think you can take it away.
Excellent. You can see my screen, I hope. So
yes, we do. Thank you.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. As Timea introduced, I am also with Mingfang, one of the co-chairs of the Data Discovery Paradigms Interest Group. So I would like to give you a quick context about what is the motivation of this interest group before I proceed with the 2 outputs I want to highlight. So essentially, the main focus of the interest group is how to ensure that research data is findable and how to support users to actually discovering data. So although the target focus is the target audience are the users themselves, the interest group actually tries to address those needs from different perspectives, including all stakeholders, from data discovery services, data providers, data repositories, and so forth. Which means that the objective of the interest group is essentially to provide a framework for these interested parties to actually express their opinions, explore different capabilities, and see exactly how data discovery can be improved. And a clear outcome of this interest group, the Data Discovery Paradigms Interest Group, is to find actionable recommendations for all those stakeholders and how we can support them. So one of those outcomes is essentially the list that I provide here, which are the 11 quick tips for finding research data that has been published 2 years ago in PLOS Computational Biology, and it's also available through RDA as a supporting output. I'm not going to go through all the 11 tips. I'm just going to give some quick highlights. So the first points are essentially to ensure that you understand as a user, as a data seeker rather, what are your particular needs? What do you actually need for data and why you need them? Because this will allow you to figure out what the appropriate resource is and to actually construct your query to this resource in a more appropriate way, in a more strategic way. In other words, ensure that you make your repository work for you, and you can also support that by refining your research, your actual search. Another tip that is listed here is to ensure that you have a process of assessing the relevance of the data and how fit the data you actually get is for your own use. And this means that those aspects are part of your search process. And because of this assessment practice, it's always a good practice to also save your search. An additional point is that it's equally important to save the search, to look for data services rather than actual data, which means that in some cases it's more relevant to ensure that you don't go through the traditional ways of looking for data, like in traditional data sites, but actually look for alternative ways that data can be retrieved. A final point that is more relevant for life sciences, which is my background, is that you need to actually ensure that if data is sensitive, you actually treat them as such, which means that aspects like accessibility and security are things that you take into consideration when using data. And a final point, which is more community-based, is that you try to give back in the finding process, which means that when you actually search for data, you cite the data that you search for, you use, and when you produce data, you share them with a wider community. A second point, which is connected to a second output, which is connected more to a data repository perspective, is the user requirements and the recommendations. So this is a process that started about 3 years ago, if I recall correctly, and it took several iterations. So initially, our baseline was user interviews. So we reached out to people around the world, from different perspectives, from founders, policymakers, data users, librarians, researchers, and ask them basically what are the process for looking for data and what are the expectations for the data repository. So this, by reviewing those interviews and refining them, we came up with 9 requirements, and these 9 requirements are essentially what are the expectations from a user perspective from if you look in the data repository. So those requirements can be used from the data repository operators as a checklist when they are designing a new data service portal, but also for existing data services in the sense of how to improve them and how to improve the user experience. And this is a key point, especially when we're talking about big data, where everyone is actually focusing on appropriate data discovery processes. Complementing the requirements is a set of recommendations. So looking these requirements from a perspective of what should be done in the practical level from a data repository side of view, we came up with a list of 10 recommendations, which essentially, as I said, translate those requirements into practical approaches. So recommendations include support multiple query interfaces, for example, having both a graphical interface also and an API that people can retrieve this information, ensure that metadata are readable, ensure that there is an easy access to how to cite the corresponding data, ensure that there is a consistent interface across different pages, and ideally ensure interoperability with other repositories. So these recommendations can be used as guidelines again from data repositories and to ensure that they are going to be adhering to the requirements that the user have set. In closing, and this is a nice matrix that you can find in the publication that has connected to this particular output and supported by RDA in the Data Science Journal, is a connection between the recommendation and the requirement. So every recommendation, which requirements it supports, and vice versa. So one can have an easy overview of how those things are connected. And additionally, you can see also some requirements and some recommendations that are more horizontal or vertical respectively. So in one case, we have something that is more connected to 10 simple rules for finding data, and also aspects like findability and interoperability, which are more connected to the FAIR principles. In any case, all of this is accessible through the publication, as well as corresponding output listed on the RDA website. And with that, I thank you, and I also thank my co-chairs and everyone in the RDA group that actually supported these efforts.
Thank you very much for that, Ming and Fotis. We have a question that I'm going to read out to you. Actually, it's a comment and a question. So Roman David says he very much likes the 11th tip, which, if I'm not mistaken, is about giving back and citation. And he's asking if that is actually often the case in the 79 use cases that you have studied.
Thank you, David. Here's the give it back aside. So in the 79 cases, most of the people who actually, so these are two different outputs, first of all. So I'll keep this distinction. But in these 79 use cases, which were done for identifying the requirements, actually one of the points here is to ensure that you have sort of connection of data with the institution paper citations and grants. So essentially, the process of how to cite the data was one of the most consistently requested aspects of the use cases, of the interviews. And what I failed to mention, which is quite important, is that these 9 requirements are actually ranked. They are not in the order matters. So the first 2, the first is actually the most highly requested requirement, if you like, with a 9th of the lowest priority. And in that case, you can see that the second requirement is essentially ensuring this connection to citations.
Thank you very much for that, for this. Roman, do let us know if that answered your question. You can all type in any questions that you might have during the presentations as well in the question box. We don't have any additional ones, so thank you, Ming and Fotis for the presentations, and I'll pass on to the presenter role to our next speaker, who is Shelley Stall from AGU. And she will be talking to us. There you go. Thank you for turning on your camera for a little while. She will be talking about the FAIR data maturity model output. So take it away, Shelley.
Great. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my video. So hello, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the work that we've been doing in this particular effort. I have so many thank yous because it took a significant number of folks to actually get to the recommendation that's currently with the council. A whole number of you, many of you on this call, have participated in doing the review sessions and participating in our workshops, and then providing comments when our recommendation was out for review. And my co-chairs, Keith Russell and Edith Herzog, have been there from the very beginning. I came in much later, so a lot of that work had already been done, and there's just really tremendous. And a very special thank you to the folks at PwC, the editorial team that worked with us, and specifically Max Deckers, who led that. We would not have been able to get through the volume of content without their support and making sure everything was tracked and all the documents were updated. So I know there's some other teams that have the benefit of an editorial team like that, and it was just really tremendous and helpful. So let me get going and tell you what we did. The aim of the working group was to recognize the fact that when the FAIR data principles came out, there was a huge uptake. The timing of that publication and the team that put that together was really quite a pivotal moment within our community. And I think many of you, of course, are fully aware of that. And what we were finding is it was really difficult to compare the ways, the different types of assessments that were coming out. How in the world would we be able to look across our international community and have a common way to do an evaluation. So the content that we put together, we wanted to have a good set of indicators, a core set of indicators that allowed that comparison, and then the importance of each of the elements. It's different by, especially by domain. There's some very specific differences. Some of them are absolutely required, and some of them are a little bit less so, and coming up with an understanding of that, and then a way to measure from 0 to 5, where 0 means that there really isn't any work here, or the level of maturity doesn't exist, but 5 meaning it's a fully implemented indicator and the maturity is very high. So we brought together the different communities that had built their own assessment methods to come up with a way to compare them against each other. And each of their assessment methods is valuable to start with. It's just, how do we have a commonality? So let's talk a little bit about that. So the specifications and guidelines are currently with the council. When we did go out for public review, the 14 comments that we got back were incredibly valuable, but just know that there were hundreds and hundreds of other comments from the review cycles that we had done previously. So it may seem like a small number, but because we'd had so many workshops and so many opportunities for the community to take a look at the material, that in the very end, we were just grateful to get those last bits to help us move forward. So that was incredibly gratifying and helpful. So if you go to the website and you take a look at what's being recommended, you'll see the elements that we have there, and they're marked essential and important and useful. And this is how the community has come up with the method of evaluation. We were very careful not to add anything or take anything away from the actual guidelines themselves. That was one of our premises. So, other folks are finding that they feel pieces are missing from the FAIR data practices, principles, but for this particular version of the guidance, we did not want to do that. We did not want to add or take away. Now, there may be some addendum that we do later as we've moved into a maintenance mode that would be valuable to the community, but right now we're being very careful. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that the evaluation criteria allows you to look at a particular area, looking at FAIRSFAIR, or the indicators, and we have pros and cons for the usefulness of both of these. So we felt we needed both in order to have a fully understood assessment. So let's talk about adoption. We had two folks that, well, there were a number of folks that tested out the criteria, and two of them came forward with going through the adoption criteria set out by RDA, which we were incredibly grateful for. Patricia Herterich is going to be giving you the content, the findings from the FAIRsFAIR following this presentation. But Gabe Hang, who is from NOAA, well, actually, she comes from two different organizations. One of them being coming out of North Carolina's university, where she is a scientist for the Earth Science Institute, but she also supports NOAA's efforts specific to the National Centers for Environmental Information. And what's really interesting, and I know Peng, I don't know if she's on the call right now, but I've known her for quite a long time. And the work that she's been doing with NCEI has been incredible. And I think it really will demonstrate the value of this framework comparing to the years of work that she's been providing for NCEI. So they were looking at the one-stop ready data sets, so the data sets that have been prepared using some of her previous work with the data stewardship maturity model that she's built for NOAA, and that's also been adopted by a variety of other organizations worldwide. And determining if there's any gaps in that particular assessment methodology, and so that was the comparison. So here you can see that there was actually really fantastic alignment. So she uses the, or NCEI uses the OASIS reference model and the data stewardship maturity model as a premise for how the content is in that particular repository. And when it was mapped, you can see all the different levels of maturity here. And in specific, what was missing is licensing. Let me see if yeah, there we go. So R11 specific to an actual usage license. And so going forward, they're going to be more cautious about making sure licensing is available. So that was really helpful to her and to us. So that was fantastic. So the path forward, making sure as we're moving forward, as she is moving forward, that they are improving the fairness of the data sets and adding in the licensing. So let me hop through these a little bit. Yeah, great, super. Okay. So Patricia will talk to you about FAIRsFAIR. So this is just a placeholder for that conversation. I'll move on. And for our particular working group, we are really looking forward to additional adoption. So if you already have an assessment method for your organization, or you're considering a variety of assessment methods, please take a look at this criteria from the framework, Fair Maturity Model Framework, and this will help you know if that assessment method is how well it aligns. It'll give you another method to evaluate, and of course you'll make your own decision, and then give us some feedback as to what you thought about that comparison. We know that there are some, as it's being adopted, that there'll be some updates that are necessary. So we're moving back into a maintenance mode for the working group as we progress, and we'll continue to take feedback and support anybody with adoption as needed. And the next workshop for that feedback is, you'll likely see something in September, and the folks from Max and his team will provide that communication shortly. There we are.
Hey, thank you very much for that, Shelley. So you've outlined very nicely the next steps. We don't have any specific questions from the audience, but I would like to ask you how anyone who would like to contribute and reach out to the working group can do that. So I'm assuming via the RDA website, but other indication would also be useful.
Yes, I mean, certainly go through the already fantastic way that RDA has set up for communication, and that will work out just fine. Yes.
Okay, let's see if there are no other question. We can pass on to the third presentation that we have. It is what we call an adoption story. It comes from the FAIRsFAIR project. Thank you, Patricia, for turning on your camera. So our speaker will be Patricia Herterich from the DCC, from the Digital Curation Center, and I'll pass on the presenter rights to Patricia. She will be speaking, as I mentioned, about the adoption story from the FAIRsFAIR project. So if you should be able to see the presenting options. Patricia?
Switching on the microphone would help as well.
Okay. So
think I need to
there you go.
Move things out of the way.
Yep, we can see your slides.
Perfect. I'll switch my camera off and then get started. So hello everyone. My name's Patricia, and I'm just gonna talk you quickly through the work FAIRsFAIR has done on adopting the results and the outputs from the FAIR data maturity model working group that Shelley just has perfectly introduced. So that's a great follow-up and should make it easy for me. So I'll do a quick introduction to the FAIRsFAIR project and then explain a little bit what we're doing in terms of repository support to receive core trust seal certification and the FAIR assessment of digital data objects, which is where the majority of this adoption work has happened. So FAIRsFAIR project is on fostering fair data practices in Europe, and it's a 22 partner project in 8 member states over a period of 3 years, and we're really looking into various aspects to supply practical solutions to put the FAIR principles into practice. We do that on a variety of levels. We do that in training, education and support, looking at data policies, hands-on practices, and the work package that I'll be presenting on is the one on that's looking at repository certification, in particular core trust seal certification, and the assessment of FAIR data in trustworthy, potentially certified repositories as part of that. So in that work package, as I said, our engagement with the working group has mainly been in this particular work package, and they're in 2 sub-activities. One is looking at capability maturity models towards the FAIR certification of repositories. That is a complicated title, and the task itself is not much easier. So what we're looking at is developing a maturity model that can help repositories to make an adjustment of how mature their FAIR capabilities or FAIR supporting capabilities are. So at the moment, we're looking at a lot of maturity models that are out there and how these might map to support the FAIR principles. Also using the outcomes of the FAIR data maturity model working group. I did not add the big scary mapping spreadsheet, so I spare you that, but this is happening. And another task is looking at the FAIR assessment of digital data objects, and there particularly we're looking into 2 pilots that I will talk about in more detail in a minute. So to also work on this maturity model, what we're doing on the road there is we're supporting 10 repositories in achieving core trust seal repository certification, and that will give us an insight in some of the details how well-equipped repositories currently are to support FAIR data and a FAIR ecosystem. So this is the usual core trust seal certification process where repositories apply by filling a self-assessment, submit to core trust seal, where it then gets peer-reviewed by reviewers, and if it needs some revisions, then those happen, but the outcome is that a repository is core trust seal certified for a period of 3 years. What we are currently doing in FAIRsFAIR is we're adding basically support before the assessment happens, and that is through some additional webinars and one-to-one support with the repositories that we that have been selected, trial reviews of their self-assessment before that goes into the proper submission, and some other things just to make sure that the Court Trust Seal certification happens smoothly for them. And we learn about their issues in the process and where they might need support to enable fair data. So for those not so much familiar with the Court Trust Seal requirements, they basically cover 3 major areas: organizational infrastructure, the management of the digital objects that are in the repository, and there's some requirements on the storage and technology and security. The current edition of Court Trust Seal requirements doesn't mention FAIR anywhere, but it's not that the FAIR principles aren't there in spirit. So this is one potential mapping how you can map the FAIR principles to the Court Trust Seal requirements and where they come in. So there is an overlap. It's just at the moment not obvious in the Court Trust Seal requirements, and another outcome of FAIRsFAIR will be recommendations to the Court Trust Seal board for the next iterations of requirements and how FAIR could be more explicit in there, and that's another bit that we are working on. So basically, we're aiming to bring the FAIR principles that are aiming at an object, a data set level, together with the assessment of whole repositories, for example, through like Court Trust Seal, and are working on a Court Trust Seal plus FAIR edition that takes that into account. So you don't have just object assessment or collection assessment standalone and then a standalone assessment and certification for your repository, but that there's actually something that that bridges that gap and brings that together. And all that will take the work of the FAIR data maturity working group, model working group into account. Where it's going to get a bit more, I guess, hands-on and easier to see how we've used the work so far and the indicators developed is in our FAIR assessment of digital data objects work. So I've just pulled out one quote from the big report, and Shelley actually has highlighted that quite nicely already. That the working group focused on what needs to be measured, but not how to measure it, and has that like out of scope and leaves that to local implementations. So what have we done in FAIRsFAIR? We've basically have done a like slightly reworked version of what to measure, and have created 15 metrics it is now, and some of them you can really map one-to-one to the indicators from the RDA FAIR data maturity model work. There was also some pre-existing work that the FAIR partners at DUNS had worked on for a FAIR self-assessment tool. And we looked at the assessment of data fitness, so another RDA working group, and basically created 15 metrics of things that we think are covering an assessment of the fairness of a data set. This is not an easy process. Shelley has mentioned that there were plenty of comments on the work the working group has done, and similarly, we have put out a version of our metrics, I think in May, and have invited people to feedback and comment, and have kindly received a lot of detailed comments from, I think, 31 people that we're currently working in just to refine, address issues where there was jargon and we weren't entirely clear on what we were wanting to measure. And the new version of that will be released in August 2020 for you to feedback on the next iteration. We've also done some thinking about when you would want to assess a data object for fairness in the standard research data life cycle, from planning to then actually making it whatever you've created discoverable and reusable, and pick two use cases that we will look at in more detail. One is assessing for fairness before a data set gets deposited into a data repository, and one is assessing the fairness of data that is in a repository for potential reuse. So that's just data that is out there already, and just checking how fair that potentially is at the moment. So how are we doing this? As I said, like, we're working with two use cases. For the one before deposit, we are now focusing on actually raising awareness for the FAIR principles rather than trying to assess the fairness of a data set that's basically still being prepared for deposit. So we thought, like, if we raise awareness, that helps researchers to focus on some areas where they might want to put in a bit more work before depositing into a data repository. So we're working on a manual self-assessment awareness tool that has just been launched early this week and can be looked at. So we'll get the link for that to you with the presentation, so you can give that a look. Again, we're looking for feedback to see if that's a useful tool or if there's anything that can be improved on it. And the other area we're looking into is an automated assessment of data sets in repositories that's gonna, like, query an API or some other output and try and apply the metrics to the metadata or files it can receive from there. And that's still in development, but hopefully also out with a version ready to, or a beta version ready to test later this year. So this is basically how we tried to translate the work from the FAIR Data Maturity Model Working Group into two practice examples. Open challenges, they are mainly echoing a lot of the things that Shelley already said, things that were raised in really constructive conversations with the working group and also by others, that there are some things that are like, there's a practice of having a persistent identifier, for example, that that is the same for metadata and data. So it's sometimes a bit difficult to identify and locate a particular object. A lot of the implementation, as Shelley has mentioned, and how useful certain indicators are and how easily they can be evaluated, really depends on local communities of practices and how their systems work. I already mentioned that the stage of the research data lifecycle is quite crucial to how easy that assessment is. And one of the things we still have to look into is how to communicate any of the results of this assessment. Shelley has shown some examples that the working group has looked into. I don't know if our Fuji assessment will look similar. So we're still figuring out how to show that this is not necessarily on all of the indicators, yes, no, but it could that there are steps in between and how to make that easily visible. That's it from me. Thank you for your attention. Thanks to my colleagues who kindly have produced slides that I could reuse. So this was a little bit less work to do. Thanks also to the RDA working group. There were really like a lot of good conversations going back and forth. And while it was not always easy to work on a moving target, I think we still have made the best out of it in our collaboration. So thank you for everyone in the working group who has been there to address any comments and questions we had. There's detailed feedback from the project as well. So any links and resources will come to you with the slides.
Yep, we will be sharing those after the webinar. Thank you very much, Patricia, for that. We do have a question from Nick Judy. He says that I've observed that certified repositories are more common in social sciences and humanities, but how is the uptake across other domains? And he's offering more detail. For instance, which domains are the 10 that you are supporting through the Core Trust Seal process, Core Trust Seal process from? So additional domains that this is not exactly on the FAIR data, it's more on the Core Trust Seal side, but.
No, that's fine. We do have a good mix in the 10 that we are supporting. So we do have some that have social science data, but we also have some life science biology data. We have big physics and infrastructures in there. So not all the repositories that we are supporting are necessarily traditional repositories. Some are research infrastructures that are basically currently looking into some data repository functionalities and setups. And it will be interesting to see how Core Trust Seal applies to them, or if there are areas that are more difficult for a research infrastructure to get a certification that might have been developed with, I don't want to say more traditional repositories in mind, but yeah, maybe with some other domains and not necessarily big data research infrastructures in mind.
I think one of your colleagues has also shared a link from to the FAIRsFAIR website, where there are a few of the results to the open call that FAIRsFAIR has run to support repositories in getting the certification. So there would be additional information for Nick on that link, and we will make sure that that's added to the slides. Let's see. Yes, Ilona, which she's, I think, also one of your colleagues. She has shared the same link, so it's good to see the support. The information is available online, and we'll make sure you have the links to view that. Thank you very much, Patricia. It is great to see how the work of the FAIR Data Maturity Model Working Group has converged with that of the FAIRsFAIR project, and how adoption is working. So I'll just take the presenter roles back just to highlight a few other options. Let's see if you can see. Yes, a few other options that are not options, opportunities that are available related to adoption under the RDA umbrella. So if we have adopters in the audience, so people that have picked up on any of the RDA solutions and outputs in a similar way to that of the FAIRsFAIR project, there is a form online where you can submit your story and well, share that with other RDA members, get feedback on it, and just help on the improvement of the adoption process. Another opportunity related to adoption is that of the CODATA is related to the CODATA call for papers for the special RDA results collection. So the European project that supports RDA has funds to support financially with the publication fees of articles that go into this specific research data line special collection, and the deadline for that is the 17th of July. There's more information on the RDA global website, so if you're interested in that, that's also connected to the adoption opportunities that are available. So without we have reached, we are just slightly over time, and I would like to thank very much our speakers for their presentations, and just remind you that the recording and the slides will be made available after the webinar, hopefully over the upcoming 24 hours. And we do have tomorrow another set of webinars, part of the RDA Adoption Week, that we kindly invite you to join. Thank you again for your time, and thank you to our speakers. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.